Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to create a basic quiz in Moodle. Now in this case I'm just going to use an old course that I've used before. And over in Moodle I want to go to Turn Editing On. In this case I'm just going to scroll all the way to the bottom. Depending on the version of Moodle it might look a little different, but I have this option down here where I can click Add Activity. If you go down here you'll see that I have Quiz. It gives you some other options. Keep in mind that you have the ability to do a feedback, which is essentially an anonymous survey where you can find out things. You also have the survey tool here, but in this case, I'm just going to select quiz and I'm going to click add. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to name it. And depending on your settings, you might have to give a description. I'm not going to put one here, but this could be a place where you could say, you could give some example, some directions on what it is that they have to do. So down here, notice you have options to open and close the quiz on certain dates. So maybe I want it to open on the 12th, and then I want it to close on the 13th. Let's try that again. I could do something like that. In this case, I'm going to uncheck those and just make it available. I can put a time limit on the quiz and enable, change this to, we'll say 55 minutes. Be aware that you have other options here too. And then here you have this option, let's make this a little smaller. There it says, attempts must be submitted before time expires. They are not counted. Open attempts are submitted automatically, or there's a grace period. So when time expires, if you're using time, but in this case, I'm not going to use it, but these are the different options that are available, so be sure to play with them whenever you're creating a quiz too. It's always best to create it, do a sample quiz first, whether you try it yourself or have some students test it out. Sometimes people will do a quiz, for instance, for the syllabus or other things early on, so you as the instructor get comfortable with using the quiz tool, but as well, students get comfortable with it. There's some options here where you can, depending on how you set up your gradebook, attempts allowed, highest grade method. So be aware that you have some of these different options. I'm just going to leave it as default. All right, so question order, you can randomly shuffle it. Now then you could create a new page for every question, or you could say that, maybe never, I want all questions on one page. Depends a lot on how big the exam is going to be. In my case, I tend to just use, if and when I do, small quizzes, so I always keep them on one page. All right, so then shuffle within questions. So that's, for instance, if it's multiple choice, you can shuffle, the order of A, B, and C, etc. All right, how questions behave, deferred feedback, adaptive mode, immediate feedback. And so you can see a deferred feedback is going to wait. So you're ready, immediate feedback, gives them feedback right away, interactive with multiple tries. So it depends a lot on what is your purpose, how you plan to use this. There's a lot of options here. I'm not going to go over them now. Be sure to go through and, basically it comes down to when someone gets a right answer or a wrong answer, let's say, you can give them feedback then or later. And so it's, or once the quiz is closed. And so you have to figure out what makes sense for you. Couple more options here. I'm just going to keep going down. Here you can actually give a password. So sometimes what faculty do, for instance, let's say you have a student who needs extra time on an exam. They might make a separate copy of the exam and put a password for the one that gives more time. There's some overall feedback. So based on the grade, you can give certain type of feedback. Now if I keep going down, there's lots of stuff here. Let's hit save and display. So now what I've done is I've essentially created a canvas for the exam. Now, Blackboard is similar, a lot of LMSs. Now you have to actually then add the questions. So this is where I can go through, hit edit quiz. So down here, this is where I can click add a question. And I have some basic options here. So I'll just select true and false. So this, it just wants a name. Oops. All right, and this is where I actually put in the question. So Colorado's in the Pacific Northwest. The answer is false. Now I could give feedback, general feedback, or specific feedback based on how they answered. I can do some other things with tags, but let's just save this. Okay, so there I have my first question. You can notice that you can preview it, but right now I'm going to get a multiple choice. Notice that it says page 1. So all my questions right now are on page 1. That becomes more important if you have multiple questions. I'm just going to call it question 2. All right, so now we come down here, and this is where we actually, and be where you can shuffle, you can change some things here, how you want them to appear, but I'm just going to put So I'm going to scroll all the way down and I'm going to hit save. So you can see the process could take a while. You can import test banks. There's lots of things you can do to speed up this process, but once it's done, let's make sure I did that right. So it's saying I've missed something, so let's, okay, so multiple tries. I'm going to say there is no penalty. Let's scroll up to see if that was actually what was giving the error. Okay, so I wanted it set to 100%, so students can get full grade. So you can imagine sometimes partial credit based on, well, like you saw, if they take it more than once, or sometimes if there's more than one right answer, that could be relevant. But so at this point, you could do some other things with order and paging. That doesn't matter. I'm going to, at this point, go back to the front. So I'm going back to the front page of my course. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to look at final exam. So I'm going to preview the exam. And you notice that that original text I put for the description shows up there. So that's really where it's helpful to tell students if they can take it more than once, what happens, etc. Let's hit next. And that's just it. So my exam summary of my attempt was successful. So hopefully this gives you a basic idea of how you can create a test or quiz or exam, whatever you want to call it, in Moodle. And you basically do that first by creating the canvas and then adding questions. Be aware that I can hide this, and that if you don't want it available right away, you're either going to want to use the ability to restrict when it appears, or you're going to want to make sure you hide it, because students can sometimes see it right away. And so hopefully this gets you on your way creating your first quiz in Moodle. Thanks.